Hey everybody, welcome back to Movies and TV Shows on the Ball. My name is Steve and
Jay.
And on this episode we are going to be it's another Wickening.
The Wickening.
The Wickening.
Two.
John Wickening. John Wick 2 is what we're talking about. Now with the success of the franchise, they have just released a fourth John Wick film, which we will get to at a later date. But I decided, since we've been working on John Wick, or we talked about doing John Wick Chapter 2, Jay and I decided to do a do a podcast on the second John Wick, and then we'll go into the third one after this,
Right.
and get the trilogy completed. So Jay, do you want to do a refresher of do you remember what happened after John Wick?
Actually, the first one sort of ends with him. He kills Vigo, right, as Vigo's trying to run off in this helicopter, and so they get through their car, fight in the rain.
Oh, yeah.
And then it ends with him, he crashes the car into a
That thing.
and that's where he patches himself up and he gets the dog and sort of walks off.
Walks off, that's right. So that happened. Now, John Wick Chapter 2, I think, was released. John Wick 1, I don't know if it was back to back.
I'm not sure either.
Let's see.
I wouldn't think so, but maybe.
So it took a 3-year break and came out in 2017. So, so it was, I think, directed by the same.
I think so. It was pretty similar in theme.
Yeah, it was, and this one actually has I like this one because this has Morpheus comes back, or
Right.
Lawrence Fishburne. He joins the cast.
All right,
Of
it
the
was
John
the
Wick.
Bowery King.
The Bowery King. And so this is I think, and it was kind of I guess 2014 was this film, or what did you say, 2016?
2017.
2017 was this film. So this was 18 years after The Matrix.
Yeah, I guess I can't remember when The Matrix came out.
Well, The Matrix came out in 99.
99.
So, yeah, so about 18 years.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
18 years, yeah.
So, we're going to watch it and give you our thoughts. I think it was... So, here we go. Hey, guys, we're back. We just got out of John Wick Chapter 2.
That's right. Well, Steve, what did you think? How's it compare? What did you think compared to John Wick 1?
I kind of think it's kind of a lot like, when we reviewed it's kind of like watching the first episode of Buffy.
Yeah.
And I think, but it wasn't that bad of a jump,
Right.
from John, 2, because 2 he gets it so it starts out with the guy from Bad Boys 2.
Oh yeah, Vigo's brother. Yeah.
Who basically, he kind of gives him the sort of, for anybody that just jumped into John Wick Chapter 2 without seeing 1, he basically gives him sort of the backstory.
Right.
How he was,
his brother had killed his dog.
And
they took his car.
And he
and
killed him.
Out for revenge.
And he killed him with a pencil.
Right.
And what I like about it is talk.
I thought it was a lot more. I don't know. It's sort of this one sort of just is sort of pedal to the metal on the sort of the violence. Pretty much the whole movie.
And what I kind of think about it is it does feel like it kind of picks up the the first one. Like I kind of said, I think the first one pretty much has to kind of explain it to you.
Right.
Mild-mannered John Wick, they kill his dog. Oh, they found out that the guy that the fact that he killed his dog is an assassin.
Right.
In 2, in this one, it kind of feels like, he gets his car back.
Right.
And what I like about it is the first kill is, so they're talking. He's going, he killed a guy with a pencil. And he's like, with a bloody pencil.
Uh-huh.
And in like the first scene you see him in, the guy flicks out a cigarette and starts smoking it, and,
Right.
and then John Wick comes out and rubs the cigarette out down his throat and
Yeah,
kills him. Well,
Yeah,
I guess
like-
Carly kills him.
yeah.
And then, but like I like how the action and you're just you just thrown right into it.
Yeah. And I guess with this one, it's sort of like it sort of expand. It is, they sort of add. Well, now there's like this whole like sort of like shadow organization of like assassins that they really call the High Table, and so now he's got to deal with some of that stuff.
Yeah, and what
It's like
what I like about it is so basically in the scene is he gets his car back and it's a huge action scene, and I think and it's a great action scene,
Yeah.
great car, and then he drives around in the garage, and like I think he flips one of my favorite scenes is he takes the car and he hits somebody into a pole, and it's like
Yeah, it's pretty brutal.
It's pretty brutal. And then so what I like about it is he gets to his, so the action scene happens. He drives off into his house.
Yeah.
And he talks to John Leguizamo, who basically says, this car is completely screwed, but I can fix it. I like how he says, I can fix it. It's fine.
By 2030, I think he says.
By 2030. So, that's what?
Still got seven more years.
7 more years.
Yeah.
Gosh. But then you have...
then you sort of see John sort of like, okay, now I'm finally done.
They got me out. I'm out of the game. And then all of a sudden, what's his name?
Santino.
Santino. I was going to say, played by, I think he was the villain in... I think we looked this up. He's like mostly like an Italian actor. He's an Italian actor. It's Richard Scarmico, and he is best known for his roles in The Shadow of the Day. He's been in pretty much My Brother, just a bunch of other mostly Italian films.
Yeah, I think he's an Italian actor.
He's not done a lot of. He did John Wick Chapter 2, and he shows up as a cameo in 3.
Okay.
And then, so he's kind of been, but I like how he's kind of sophisticated.
Right.
And I like how he's like sophisticated, and how he is very, he wants, because he comes in and he sort of sits down and says, John, I'm sorry, because I think a lot of these assassins pretty much apologize for the fact that his wife's gone, and
right.
how he wants to get kind of, I know you want to get, we really want you to be back in the game, but I know you kind of don't want to, but come on, man, it's fun.
Yeah, then unfortunately, John has this sort of like blood oath pact with this Santino guy.
Santino, and what they do is they basically get it's kind of a coin.
Right.
It's in the coin, and it's like a finger prick. It's not like it's not like a blood oath like an itch where they have to it's a locket, and then they kind of do a thumb, like a bloody thumbprint.
Yeah.
And then so he kind of says, join my group. Or
right.
Is it like?
Well, he's like, you need to honor your promise.
Honor your promise.
His favor.
And
John says no.
I'm out of the game.
And so Santino's like, okay, and then he goes and blows up his house.
Yeah, and what I love about it is he goes, okay, and he walks away, and then he goes to his trunk, and he pulls out
a grenade launcher.
Just, I mean, that's the world we're in right now.
Yeah.
In the John Wick series. He's got a grenade launcher, and he, puts it up to him, blows up his house. Now, I did watch, and I think I told you this while we were watching this, in commentary and the special features, the director was saying, what if you take everything John Wick had and you take it away from him and he has to kind of start from scratch?
Right.
And that's kind of how this film sort of starts out.
Right. Yeah, because he had just gone through the process of like reburying all his guns and stuff back in his basement.
So he's like, and it kind of reminds me of that scene in The Godfather where he says, once they got me back out, once I was out, then they put me back in.
Right.
You know. So anyway, so they basically blow up his house. Luckily, guys, I just want to let you know, his new dog survives. It doesn't die. So he basically, after he blows up his house and kind of his pictures of him and his wife are now all disintegrated.
Yeah.
He basically goes back to New York
to the
Continental, where we have R.I.P. Lance Reddick.
Right. It's so sad.
As the
concierge.
Concierge saying like, "Do you have room service for me?" And he's like, "Yes,"
Oh, he asked him to watch his dog.
Watch his dog.
Yeah, and so he talks with Winston, and Winston's pretty much like, you have to, either you do this favor for him or you die. If you kill him, you die. So pretty much.
Yeah. And I like how Winston kind of feels like he's like that cool, suave character. Kind of like there's something kind of very like enchanting about him.
Yeah.
And he was, because it's played by Ian McShane, and Ian McShane has done such a great job with films in, he played Blackbeard in Pirates of the Caribbean.
Oh, right, yeah.
So, I mean, he has that kind of like, I like how he's played sort of a decently good guy, I guess. So Jay, what was so basically, and I like how he's like says when they're in the Continental, he says, Santino is basically, don't get into Santino's business.
Yeah, well, I guess, so Winston tells him, like, you have to,
honor the code.
Right. You have to go and find out what he wants, and you have to do it if you want to get out of this. And so after that, John goes and meets Santino at this art museum. And
yes.
That's where we learn that Santino wants him to kill his sister, Gianna.
And what I like about the scene is they're sitting there, and he's, like, kind of discussing art. And there's something, before we go into it, what do you think of Giacchino as a villain?
Santino?
Santino, I'm
yeah,
sorry.
I like it. He's sort of like, somewhat cold and calculating, sort of. Just,
super, but he's
like,
got kind of
hungry.
he's not. I think he doesn't have a lot of character, like a lot of personality to him.
Yeah.
He's very sort of straight to the point. I mean, like John, and like, I mean, there was something when you look at John Wick with John Wick 1. Oh gosh, what's it? Is it Vigo? Vigo had some personality.
Yeah.
And I was kind of like, watching this again, I was kind of like,
yeah,
he doesn't have that
as much as Vigo
personality as Vigo does.
Yeah.
Vigo at least had some,
Yeah. But I think it's sort of balanced out because there's a lot more character sort of going on in this one with like the Bowery King and all the other players.
Yeah. We're more I think this kind of enters us into the world, and it's a fun world if you think about it.
Yeah. And so after getting the mission to kill Santino's sister, John, goes to, he has like another stash of his stuff at like I think it was like a bank.
Yeah.
And so he gets some stuff, and he's pretty much headed straight off to Italy,
Rome.
Yeah.
And then we kind of have, what I like about that is he goes montage. To montage, and those montages are great.
Fun montage, yeah.
Because he goes in there and they talk about like, and I like. Anyways, popcorn's good. But I like what they do is so like they talk about the tailor first. Is it the first the tailor? Let's talk about the tailor first.
Yeah, they sort of like, in the montage. They sort of like it's all mixed up.
Mixed up.
Yeah,
so
they
it's
got
like
the tailor, the sommelier. What are they? I get the guy with the maps.
the guy with the maps.
I can't remember if he had a fun name.
And
Uh,
the weapons guy.
yeah, well, that's the sommelier.
Oh, the small
yeah,
okay.
yeah. So for the tailor, it's like the front for the business. It sort of looks sort of like a sweatshop.
Yeah.
And he gives them a coin. They bring him back to the back, and it's like
and
James
then
Bond
and they showed it is James Bondish, but it's kind of got like this style. Like it's just the style that you just can't really kind of imitate like with Bond.
right
Where he's like going, so what kind of, so what do you want? What kind of dress suit do you want? One for evening and one for day.
right
And then what I love, and so they basically go through, kind of like his, like body armor, and they're going to sew the body armor into his
right
clothes. So it kind of gives you kind of like, okay, this is how he can survive all these
so he's not
punches.
a superhero.
Yeah.
He's got a magical bulletproof suit.
Yeah, exactly. But what I like about it is so they do the suit, and he's like going, what kind? He's like, I want one for evening and one for dinner. And then what I love is where the best scene in that scene is where you have the guy that, and I think it was in the first one, right?
No, I don't think he was.
So if you've seen, if you got, ladies and gentlemen, if you've seen Spy, you
Right.
remember that the French, was he a French?
I can't remember that. Was he one of the super?
He was the super
spies?
spy that was in love with Melissa
Right.
McCartney.
Okay. Yeah.
So he plays the concierge,
Sommelier.
the sommelier, which is I guess the weapons expert.
Yeah. So it's making a point because that sommelier is normally a wine expert.
Wine
So
expert.
That's why it sort of seems like he's.
Yeah. Okay. Sommelier. So basically, he talk. So like what I like about it is, and I'm going to get into this a little bit more, is that he basically gets a weapon, or so he goes through the weapons and he says, he's like, I want to have for dinner. So like John Wick shows up and says, I want to, I need something for dinner, a nice, taste, robust. Like you think like, okay, he's talking about one, but they make gun shooting appetizing.
Right.
And then he like says Glock number 24 with the robust turn, and you see John Wick checking out every gun and stuff.
Right.
And then like what I like is so he's like gets into this huge like AK-47 type guns.
Right.
And then he's like, well, okay, so dinner's over. What about dessert? And he's like, the cutlery. And he pulls out all these knives and he tries them on.
Right.
Or she like shows them the knives. And I like that kind of stuff. Like this is kind of the world we're in.
Right.
And then, so, do we go to comment yet or not yet?
Right. So then, pretty much after he gets all his gear and he gets his plan to like sneak in through the catacombs,
and like
he goes to
Rome.
Yeah,
no, he's already in
Rome.
Rome.
He's in Rome, so he's going to Gianna's getting. It's like she's being sort of, we have this like super assassin thief, high council, and so Gianna's about to be like it's her party for becoming part of the council.
And what I like about it is
it's like this ancient
ruins, and they're having this huge party, or this nightclub kind of concert.
So it's sort of like a throwback to the nightclub scene.
So, the first one, yeah. And what I like about it is like you have like the violins, and then you've got like kind of an opera going on.
It's like an electronic future opera.
I know, but then the electronic stuff comes in and it goes. And then I like what they did with he runs into Common.
Right.
And I think this is the first. Common wasn't in the first one.
No, yeah. So he's the bodyguard for
Gianna, and so he's and it kind of reminds me of him when it is. It does remind me going back to the first one of the when John Wick takes on
Vigo.
Vigo, not Vigo. Is it Vigo's the son? No.
The son. I can't remember the son.
Son's name, but he, if you remember the first one, they're in the spa,
Oh, they sort of stop and like look at each other for a second.
Yeah, and then they're that's kind of reminds me of the first in this one, but like there's like this huge, but there's a huge crowd that he's running through,
Right.
and like this opera singer's playing, and then like they fight,
Right.
and then apparently there's and the fighting is cool. Like there's like let's discuss the choreography of the fight
Yeah,
just a little bit.
it's very, it's still like I don't know, it's still really well done. It's very clean. It's not like a lot of stuff where
It's not
there's
shaky camera as it is.
But I feel like this one's like, it's still like pedal to metal with the violence. There's lots of like him just shooting people.
Well, and he's got the knives,
right?
And you can kind of see them go like, and then like, or as I'm making kind of gestures, but like, it does kind of have a cool fight and Common, and so. And it's like Common and Wick fight,
right?
And but then but it's like they toss and turn through the streets,
right?
And like cars hit them one side or the other, and it's a great fight choreography. And they just keep rolling,
down some
stairs, and then. They roll all the way into the Continental,
and
burst
then
into the glass of the Continental, or the Roman Continental.
Right.
And who was it?
I can't remember his name. It's sort of like the Roman Winston.
Roman Winston.
Yeah, I can't remember his name. He doesn't show up a whole lot.
He doesn't show up a lot, but he's got this cool ponytail, and he's like, gentlemen, there'll be no fighting in the Continental.
Right.
Come on, let's go to the bar and have some drink. And then John's like, was it gin? And he says, yeah, weren't you drinking? And then Common says, bourbon. So they get like gin and bourbon. Common gets a gin and John gets a bourbon.
Right.
And so they're at the bar drinking. And they kind of have this really cold moment because they don't say anything to each other.
Yeah, and then I think Common's like, "Well, are you out?" And then John's like, "No," because he knows Common's going to come after him.
Yeah.
So he's back sort of stuck in this cycle of violence.
Yeah.
And he knows because sort of like also after the party, like he knows that now Santino is trying to kill him for murdering his sister.
Yeah.
So he's like sort of caught up.
Yeah.
In the cycle again.
Yeah, and it's excuse me. It's and what I kind of like about it is did you so like they basically have to talk, and it's kind of it kind of reminds me of the way Jimmy the cop kind of says, "Are you working again?"
Uh-huh.
That kind of has that kind of remind me of it. So they have a talk, and then.
So now, after that, so now John's going back to New York to try to kill Santino. Santino sort of double crossed him because he's like,
he said something about his sister.
He like made him kill his sister, and now he pulls out like a $7 million contract against him because he killed his sister.
Yeah, so he kind of turned the tables around him.
So John is upset with that.
Yeah.
And so now, but on his way there, pretty much every assassin is after him.
Yeah, and like what I like about it, but we gotta like talk about the scene because what's cool about it is as he's walking in, is it New York?
I think New York and like the subways and stuff.
And everyone's like TikTok. Like he passes a homeless guy looking for like asking for money, and he's like, TikTok, John Wick. You have to, and then he goes up the stairs to,
yeah, so pretty much he's just sort of like, every, like, it seems like every, like, 10 feet.
There's assassin. But the assassins are so cool because
one's a
sumo wrestler.
One is like, pulls out a gun out of violin,
and like, but like, I like how what's so cool about the fight scenes in this is it's not like, have this, they all do it kind of quietly because you don't notice, no one's like, not till at least one scene, no one like shoots, like no one like.
Yeah, especially when he meets again up with Common, and they're like sort of like shooting each other while like walking.
Yeah.
Right.
So they meet up with Common in like I guess a mall of some sort.
Yeah, it was like I don't know if that's a real place in New York, but it seemed like very few. I don't know. It's like
Future.
everything was white and like
Yeah, I mean the way the architect works is pretty cool. But so they're walking in
like he like Common's like up on the balcony.
Common's on the balcony and he's got a gun and John's got the gun too.
Right.
And they're just like looking at each other and he's looking above and they're looking down and then they're going pew, 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 and it's got a silencer on it.
Right.
So, what do you think? I mean, did you like the action? Like, let's kind of discuss the. What did you like the action better in this one than you like, or the second one, or than the first one, or did you kind of feel like it was a little bit too over the top? But you were having fun with it.
I think this one.
I mean,
is maybe a bit worse story wise, but like the action is pretty much like just so.
Action probably.
Is like it's so intense the whole time. It's like it's good that I don't know. It's
you kind of like the story is sort of like okay, and I think it balances it out where because the first one is so much like he lost his dog, he lost his wife.
It sort of takes a
and
while
he's
to
an
build
assassin.
up to it.
Yeah, and now we're at a point where we're
this
having
one's like
fun.
Full like pedal to metal.
Metal fun, yeah. And so anyway, as we continue, so they're at the mall. They start shooting at each other,
right?
And then like they get to the sumo.
Well, I guess once he's fighting with Common, they have like their sort of final fight in the like a subway car.
Yeah.
Like stabs him in the heart.
Stabs him. Yeah, he stabs him in the heart.
Like
and it kind of reminds me of just like kind of in that same way of that that scene where like no one's really paying attention, but they're like having a fight. I think I think that's what makes it sort of underground.
Yeah.
Of the assassins in like in this world that we're in.
Yeah.
So
eventually, after all these assassins, John sort of seems like he's run out of steam. He's got shot a couple times. And
yeah, but he's got like body armor and
yeah, but he's like gotten through a bit. So he goes.
I mean, he's got. It's kind of like the Fast and the Furious. They have like.
Right.
I mean, like the Fast and the Furious. There's that line where she's like, they like I think in like I guess it was 7 or 5, maybe 6. They fall out of a window and land on a car. And he's like, they're like, they've got like 100% life or something. He's like, how'd you know the car would break or fall? And he said, it was faith.
But he's like, run out of steam bit, so has to make a pit stop. So he goes up to another homeless guy and sort of gives him one of the little like fancy assassin coins, and he says like, take me to him.
And then they put a
like a tarp over him.
Tarp over him, and then he's like going, more change. And then he wakes up, and we have a reunion,
right?
If we will, because the pigeon.
Morpheus.
No, hold on, I was getting there.
Oh, sorry.
The pigeon man, or the
Bowery King.
The Bowery King, I think was his name, was played by Lawrence Fishburne, who is Morpheus.
Right.
In the Matrix movies, and this was their first reunion since, I guess, 2003.
Okay.
So probably about
20 years?
Well, no.
Wait, no, sorry. This came out, what is it, 2017?
Yeah. So...
A while
ago.
Yeah, 14 years.
14 years, I think. And so, he's like, John Wick! And he starts clapping, and he's got these pigeons. He's got these carrier pigeons.
Right.
And he says, he's the Bowery King, and he says, I've got eyes and ears all around the city, and we've heard that you've got a bounty. There's a bounty for $2 million. Seven. Oh, not $2 million. $7 million.
Right.
And what I liked about what they did is he's like, there's something about how, I see him when he plays him with Morpheus. He's got that cool, calm voice. Right. And when you meet Lawrence Fishburne in like a lot of movies, he can really bring that loud voice.
Right.
What would your thoughts on having Morpheus back or Lawrence Fishburne back.
I liked him. It sort of adds like another
Kind of
faction
faction
sort of in
to
the film,
yeah. So he's like, I've heard that you've got 3 strikes on your or not Morpheus. The Bower King says, I've heard you've got 3 strike. You've got a bounty for like 7. I keep wanting to say 50 million. No. $7 million, and he's like going, well, what can you do? And I've noticed watching it again with this podcast is that he basically there's sort of a desperation in John Wick in this one that
he needs some help.
Yeah.
And so he sort of convinces Morpheus to help him.
The Bowery King.
Yeah. Because he knows, like, if he lets Santino stay in power, he's going to take over New York.
Yeah.
And so, now, the Bowery King's like, get this man a gun.
Get this man a gun. Like, he has that announcer type voice.
Right.
And he's like, and he gives him a gun, but the gun only has 7 bullets, and he says, $7 million, $1 million a bullet, pretty much.
Right.
And I think it's a revolver. Is it a revolver?
It's a pistol.
It's a pistol. Yeah. Okay, yeah. I always think of the revolver just because it's the 7.
Gotcha.
Like this. But anyway, so he gives them a gun, and they basically go to
back to the art
museum, and they're at the art museum, and he's kind of like, and he sees Santino. I'm going to say Valentino for some reason. Santino. He's sitting at the art exhibit, and they start discussing, I guess, some sort of art.
Oh, yeah. Or now they're having a sort of like a funeral party / his party for becoming part of the high table.
Yeah. Oh, is that what they're doing at the
at the art museum?
At the art museum.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and he's like going, you've been a oh God, what does he say? He says you've been a
can't remember, like, to John Wick. I can't remember if they talk too much on this. I think he mentioned something about talking about his sister, and then I think they just do sort of like a stare down for a second. And like sort of like you see the crowd sort of part around,
and then they have the chase with in the museum. Right. So like they go into this like hall of mirrors. Yeah, or is that the first? Or no.
Well, that's sort of the end. They sort of like you see John Wick sort of. He probably kills like 200. I don't know.
So he goes
like a rampage.
So he goes in. So like he basically says, John, you're gonna have to fight, or not fight, but you're gonna have to, kill me, because Santino wants John to kill him.
No, he just wants John dead.
He wants John dead.
Yeah, pretty much.
But he wants his sister dead as well.
Yeah, John's already killed her.
Yeah, and he's like, "Thank you for doing that." And then he's like, "No, I'm gonna, you killed my." It's kind of like the line in Princess Bride, where Princess Bride says, "You killed my father. Prepare to die."
Right.
Kind of thing. And so they have a chase through the museum. Right. There's this really cool scene where they chase through the paintings, and then they get into this room that's like the Hall of Mirrors, pretty much.
Right, it's like a funhouse.
Funhouse kind of thing. But it's so cool because the music is like this slow. It kind of reminded me of, how the pool scene in the first one. Oh, remember how in the pool in the first one they kind of have that kind of low watercolor music,
right?
In the pool, and then you see him just go shooting all the guys. And this one, I like how they're in the fun house, or I'm going to call it the fun house. They're in the Hall of Mirrors, and the doors are open, and he comes in the door, and then Santino is following, or is being chased by John.
Right, and he goes through like a little monologue, like, if you kill me, like, someone else will come after
you. And so he basically goes through John or Santino, or goes through the glass house.
Right. And so John's like about to get to him, but then sort of like Santino's sort of like lieutenant shows up,
Yes, and his
with, like,
lieutenant was
reinforcements.
huge. Was the lieutenant the huge guy or
No, that's sort of like
the girl?
mute,
The girl,
yeah, the
mute
mute
girl.
girl.
So
Yeah.
she's like deaf. She's deaf,
Right, or
and
she doesn't speak. We don't
she
know.
doesn't. We don't know, but she does a lot of sign
She
language,
communicates with sign language.
and we assume she's deaf. Anyway, and she points at Jar or points at they sign language, and she goes after John.
Yeah,
John,
so she sort of covers as Santino is able to escape. She's like, "I'll take care of this," and they
Yeah.
sort of have like they have another final showdown with a knife fight.
Okay, let's get there before we get there.
Yeah.
What do you think of the Santino's right hand man or right hand woman?
Yeah, I don't know. I sort of liked the lieutenant because, I don't know, second in command or lieutenant. She sort of, because I think they did a good job of you can't give too much story, so she has a lot of flair, with that, speaking through sign language.
Well, and I think that's what I liked about her was that she was they made her a character without being I wouldn't say with her disability. They didn't they just made her a character that has a disability.
Right. Yeah, I like that, and it they gave her. Without barely any screen time, they gave her a lot of personality.
Yeah, oh yeah, and she can kind of and so they go through. So where were we? The Hall of Mirrors.
Yeah.
So they're in the Hall of Mirrors, and the doors open, close, open again.
Right.
And it kind of they go through it. And I kind of like the music's a little bit more, kind of more jumpy than I think in the first one.
Yeah.
And so they go through the Hall of Mirrors, and he takes out all these guys.
Right.
And then they get through the art Hall of Mirrors and go. I'm trying to think.
Yeah. So as I have Santino is able to escape because John Wick has to fight the lieutenant.
The lieutenant, right?
Yeah.
And the lieutenant was a girl, right?
Yeah, and I think I looked it up in the cast. I think they never say her name, but I think she's listed as Ares.
Ares.
In the cast list.
Okay, hold on. I think she is.
But they never say that at all.
Ruby Ross, I think, is who.
Okay.
Now she plays Batwoman in the CW Batwoman series.
Okay. I can see she'd be good at that. Yeah.
She's 37, and her other works include she was in Pitch Perfect 3 after John Wick 2, Triple X, Return of Xander Cage, and she was in she'll be in the Dirty Angels, whatever that is. But her other TV, she was also in The Flash and Arrow and Supergirl. She plays Batwoman. Okay. So that's now that you kind of mention it, I'm like, yeah, she does kind of remind me of something. But she can talk in this film. Anyway, right. So I like how she's so she goes through the, they fight. She chases John.
They sort of fight in this sort of mirrored corridor. It's like John's sprinting after Santino, and she's waiting for him.
And so she's there, and then they fight, and then after they fight, Santino basically
runs through the
hotel, and then this is kind of where we're getting closer to the end.
You're right.
Where, they get to the hotel. And when they're at the hotel, John shows up and commits the cardinal sin of the John Wick John Wick universe.
Right.
The continental rule is you can't have any do business on violence on continental grounds.
Right.
And what I like about it is he shows up and he gets kind of holds on. And he's because I think John Wick is just too pissed at Santino, because Santino kind of after watching it again, he's not a memorable villain, but for what he did,
Yeah,
he's
mean.
kind of mean. Yeah,
He's very mean.
mean. And so he shoots Santino in the head
Right.
and kills her. And then Winston shows up and says, "Jonathan, what have you done?
Right.
You have, you know, but since I know you have, committed the cardinal sin of killing somebody on hotel grounds. But since I know you, I'm gonna give you kind of a 5 second head start, pretty
Right.
much." And he calls all these assassins, like,
Yeah. So
or go ahead.
So John kills Santino. He sort of goes off and is sad at his house for a second, and then he's picked up by the was it concierge, Lance Reddick.
Lance Reddick.
And he takes John to meet Winston at like I don't know if it's some park in New York.
And what's cool is he says, and then Winston says, you've committed the crime.
Right.
You have to pay the price. And he says, I'm giving you 10 minutes to...
It's an hour.
An hour, whatever.
Yeah.
An hour. And happy hunting, John.
Yeah, and it's really neat because, like, sort of as Winston's sort of going through his spiel, he sort of, like, gives a signal.
And it kind of reminds me of, and I told you this once we were making notes. I says, if you remember in X2, there's this scene where Professor X basically...
takes over everyone's minds for a second.
Yeah, and he freezes time.
Basically.
And he says, if you feel like showing off, don't. And going back to John Wick, what I love is Winston shows up and kind of snaps his fingers, and everybody stands completely still. And he says, Jonathan. I love how he doesn't call him John, he just calls him Jonathan.
Right.
And he says, I'm giving you a 10-second head start, pretty much.
Yeah.
Happy hunting. And excommunicated. And then he calls him, or he calls it up, and apparently, all the world is a completely assassins in this world. So that kind of, and that'll lead you into 3.
Yeah, so it sort of ends with him like sprinting away from that part.
And I think in the third one he goes to the doctor.
Right.
Which is played. We'll get into that when we get to 3. But that was our first, or John Wick Chapter 2. Jay, what's your final thoughts?
I liked it. It's sort of, a lot of times it's hard to live up a sequel. I thought this sequel did a pretty good job.
I thought it did too. I felt kind of like, I felt like maybe watching the last 5 minutes of 1 would get me, it feels like one of those films that, you watch 1, 2, and 3 all together. It kind of feels like a cohesive. And I think, maybe, but like I felt pretty kind of like strong with the story since we did the first one. This one, I like how this one said, and I think one thing that I was watching the commentary of what the director was saying, another commentary about the special features, and they said, what if we take away everything John Wick has? What happens to him now?
Right.
And that's what I think this one sort of dealt with, in a way.
Right.
But I like this one. I give it 8. It's not as good. I think the first one was a little bit better just because it was so... But I think the first one was so fresh because the first one, you didn't realize he was an assassin until like 20 minutes into the film.
Right.
Whereas this one, okay, now we're in the assassin. Now we know who he is. Let's play. This one plays I like how this one, and I said this before, it plays with the idea of assassin.
Right.
So, Jay, what would you give John Wick Chapter 2 on a scale from 1 to 10?
I'd give it, I think I might agree with you, like either 8 or 7, I feel like.
8 or 7?
Yeah.
I'll give it an 8.5.
Okay.
It's not, like I said, I think the first one was better, but I think this one was a decent sequel.
Yeah. I have to remember, almost think the action sequences are better in this one. So,
Yeah, well, I think they when I think the action like and we have to. Did we mention this? The he remember in the he said in the at the beginning of the film. Did we mention the pencil?
Yeah.
Oh, we did. Okay.
Yeah.
Never mind.
Oh yeah, I don't know if we talked about where he actually did like.
Yeah, he actually
Later
in the first one, and I think in the beginning of this one, he says he killed him with a pencil,
right?
With it, and he's like, yes, we've heard the story, and in this one, when he's at the mall shopping center, he actually kills somebody with a pencil,
right?
So it's pretty cool. So I'll give this one 7, maybe a 7.5.
Okay.
Maybe like it's kind of like it's not as it's a reason it's no T2 to Terminator 1.
Right.
But it's a decent sequel.
No, it's definitely good.
So that's it for John Wick. Coming up next will be John Wick Chapter 3 and then Chapter 4. And then once we're out of our wicketing, what will we probably cover?
We'll figure it out.
We'll figure it out. I'm Steve.
And I'm Jay.
Have a good night. Bye.